Hello and welcome back to another stream. My name's Wimpy, welcome to my world. Right, this evening we've got a few things I'm going to go through, some personal projects I've been working on. So we're going to take a look at the updates to Steam that I've worked on, a recap on where I went with the Ubiquity slideshow with the community, a look at FFmpeg, nvenc in Ubuntu, how that affects OBS. So without further ado, let's get into it. Right then, let's just remind ourselves why I've been doing all of this stuff. Let's see if we can get this on the right part of the screen. Okay, so we've got the Ubuntu Focal Fossa release fast approaching. Here's the release schedule. Where are we? We're the 13th, so we are here, this empty week here, where apparently nothing is going on. Turns out there's a lot going on. So, welcome to everyone in the chat. Hello. If you want to ask questions, please do. Tag me. They show up a bit more. It's difficult to see all of that all at the same time. Now, I'll just do a quick recap on what the purpose of these streams are. I've been inspired by my good friend Alan Pope, who's been doing a number of streams engaging with the Ubuntu community for many months now, back to the 1910 release, where he's been explaining how you can get involved in the testing and QA process, guiding you through the process of filing bugs. He's also been revealing new features in Ubuntu 20.04 recently, introducing those calls to action to test. And we were discussing, the work that he'd been doing there. And it occurred to me that most evenings I sit down right here in front of my computer and I do some work on either Ubuntu Mate or Ubuntu or Debian or something Linux related. So I thought, well, if I'm going to be sat here anyway, maybe I should stream what I'm working on, share it more widely, and perhaps those of you watching will learn something or find something of interest. And it's my firm belief that us Linux enthusiasts are a somewhat techie crowd, and maybe if you see a little bit of peek behind the curtain as to what's involved, you'll think to yourself, this really doesn't look that tricky at all. I could do that. And my call to action to you is, if you're watching me do it, you can absolutely do it yourself, and probably better than I can. I still consider myself like a level 1 Linux nerd. And this evening we're going to run through a few things. Normally I'm talking about Ubuntu and Ubuntu Mate. This evening it's sort of Debian and Ubuntu related, with a leaning towards Debian. And for those of you that may be popping into this stream for the first time and seeing my fat face for the first time, you're probably wondering who on earth I am. So I'm a community contributor for Debian and Ubuntu, and sorry, I'm getting error messages pop up on the other screen. I'm a community contributor for Debian and Ubuntu, and also I work on the Mate desktop and the Ubuntu Mate flavour of Ubuntu. And that's what I do in my spare time. And then for work, I actually work for Canonical, working on Ubuntu and Snapcraft. And I lead the desktop and Snapcraft teams at Canonical. But nevertheless, I'm technically somewhat okay, but not brilliant. So hopefully we'll get into this now. So let's start with a quick recap. The last couple of streams, because user interface freeze is approaching on March the 19th, I was doing some work in Ubuntu Mate to update artwork and the slideshow in the installer. And while I was doing that, I noticed that there were outstanding merge proposals from the Ubuntu Studio project and Ubuntu Chillin, the specially adapted Chinese edition of Ubuntu, waiting to be processed. So last night I reviewed their code changes. So I thought we'd just take a little look back at that. So here is the project, let's open this all the way out so you can see the full URL here. This is the Ubiquity slideshow project, and if we look in the commit lists here, I did contact my friend Sebastian, who works on the desktop team, this morning, and sure enough, he merged the changes that Eric submitted for Ubuntu Studio into the master branch, and then a little bit later on, last night I had to reject the changes that came from the Ubuntu Chillin team. They'd got some changes which were stamping on language files for the other flavors, and they very quickly mopped that up and cleaned it. So I reviewed those again this morning, gave them a clean bill of health, and then Seb merged those as well. Curiously, although there's a change down here for some artwork changes for Ubuntu Mate, there's another one outstanding which they haven't done anything with yet. So I clearly need to buy some sweets for somebody on Monday morning to get them to take a look at that for me. So that sort of concludes what I was doing there with the installer artwork. Hello to everyone joining the stream. Welcome. Thank you for stopping by. I hope there'll be something of interest here for you this evening. So let's get into our first sort of meaty topic of the evening, which is regarding Steam in Ubuntu for the Focal Fossa release. So in order to understand some of this, we need to understand something of the relationship between Debian and Ubuntu. Many people understand that Debian is an upstream project for Ubuntu, and we have a large number of packages that sync automatically from Debian into Ubuntu. And we sync from Debian unstable. So if you're familiar with Debian's releases, you'll know there's a stable version, a testing version, and an unstable version. And we have windows in our development cycle where new packages that land in Debian unstable automatically synchronize into Ubuntu, unless for some reason or another we are blocking those synchronizations because we have Ubuntu specific changes. Perhaps we need a newer or older version of a library to support some particular functionality, or perhaps we have a patch, something like that. And it turns out that some time ago a change was made by a community contributor to the Steam package in Ubuntu, which meant that we weren't getting the automatic synchronization of Steam from Debian to Ubuntu. So we'll just take a look at this. So this is the bug that I saw whiz by my inbox the other day. Maybe we can just zoom that in a little bit. Maybe that will help. So this is actually quite an old bug. It was originally filed in October of 2018 by Mark Muller. And he writes a very detailed bug, which is basically requesting that we merge the new changes for the Steam package from Debian into Ubuntu. And you can see this fix has now been released, and I assigned it to myself. This was not something I did for work. This was something I did out of personal interest, and also, you know, for the betterment of Ubuntu. It's no good carrying old versions of things. And this bug outlines like some of the issues, and it also outlines the changes that had been made in Debian since the last time we synchronized the package, which, as you can see, are significant. There's stuff to do there with NVIDIA Shield. There's a whole raft of things. So this is just the changelog, right, of what we hadn't been pulling in automatically. As you can see, quite a lot of stuff. And then we get further down the bug here, and then we get to this point here, and I saw this because I've recently rejoined the desktop team, and so subscribed to all of the mailing lists for bugs around the desktop. And I saw an email pass by my inbox, which was this comment here, saying that Steam is still outdated, broken version in the latest Fossa. Is there anything we could do to help get it updated? So at that point, once I'd seen it, I assigned it to myself, and I actually exchanged some emails with ASCII Wolf here saying thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'm working on some updates would you help test it? So this is, you know, getting the community to help you out. And he says, yes, of course. And you can see here over the next couple of days, I make some changes. I change it to fix committed because I think I've fixed the problem. And then I submit a new version here. Now, it looks like I did a whole load of work, but in actual fact, I really didn't do that much. And this is where the relationship with Debian comes in. So this is the package listing for Steam in the experimental branch in Debian, and you can see the version of the package, and you can see the dependencies, and you can also see where the source for the package exists. I think all of the packages in Debian now live in what's called salsa. So salsa.debian.org, which is here, is a GitLab instance where all of the packaging effort for Debian happens. So I took a look in here, and I could see that Simon McVitie had been busy over some considerable time making all manner of changes to the Steam package for Debian. A whole bunch of compatibility improvements and conflict resolution, controller enhancements, and all the rest of it. So what I was able to do was take this tree of changes, and then I had to manually merge them into the Ubuntu packaging for Steam, which I did using Meld, which some of you will have seen the other evening. It's a nice way to do a graphical diff. And the reason I had to do this was because there's been a break in the synchronization between Debian and Ubuntu, and I needed to merge those changes in manually, retaining some of the changes that we'd introduced in Ubuntu, specifically a versioning change, while taking advantage of all of the good work that has gone on in Debian in the interceding couple of years. So if we take a little look at that, that is the right place. I think this is where my changes are. Let's actually use a proper code editor, shall we? Oh. That was interesting. Excuse me. That has just overloaded a window, so I just need to catch up with that. Where's that gone? Oh my goodness. That's not what you want when you're live streaming. Windows grabbing focus in another monitor. That was fun. Okay, let's do it the old-fashioned way for the moment, because I need to figure out what happened there. So there's been a number of changes, but these were the ones that I made initially, and this was basically to incorporate all the changes that had happened in Debian, and this here in the changelog references the bug in Ubuntu that I am closing by committing this package. Yeah, it did. It forked itself and stole focus, Yannick. Somewhere there is a Visual Studio Code running in a virtual monitor, and I don't quite know how to recover that at the moment. I'll get to that in a bit. So I cherry-picked all the changes from Debian, and I then made some modifications. So I turned a few bits off that we didn't need in the Ubuntu packaging, because we didn't need this helper script, and we don't need this bug control anymore, or we needed to modify that. So there was a few minor changes there, and once I'd made these changes, I then one weekend posted on the Ubuntu discourse a call to action for the community. So I said, look, I've updated the package in Focal Fossa. This is how you get it. And I made a PPA with the new version of Steam inside it, and invited people to come and test. And if they were testing, tell me something about their system specifications in case there was an issue, and it would help me track it down. And a bunch of people tested things, and it all seemed to go swimmingly. So I then say, right, thanks for all the feedback. This looks great. And I then contacted Rick Mills, who is an Ubuntu community contributor who does a lot of the technical lead on the Kubuntu flavor. And he's a Mutu, so he has upload rights to the Universe archive, which I do not. I'm currently in the process of applying for elevated permissions. And Rick then uploaded that revised version of Steam into the archive, and I think brilliant. Problem solved, or so I thought. One moment, I'm just going to have to make a subtle change here. There we go. I've just dropped that music down. I don't know how loud it is for you listening at home, but it's a bit loud in my head at the moment. So, I then think this is all sorted, and then I find that another bug passes by my inbox. Oh goodness, we've got multiple screens going on here. And this time, ASCII Wolf is back, having emailed me, and says, hang on a minute, I can't see Steam in the software center anymore. And I had made a change to the what's called app stream data, the metadata that populates the store. And for whatever reason, it wasn't showing up in GNOME software. So if I just fire up GNOME software over here, I'll bring this down. There it is. This is a current version. So I then went on and I spent some days, it turns out, figuring out why that was broken. And now, if we search for Steam in Focal Fossa, we can see there is an entry called Steam Installer. We also have this Steam Devices, which was something that I added here. This is it existed before, but it's more prominently displayed, and it's also automatically installed now if you install Steam via the installer or not. And what that will do is it pulls in all of the necessary UDEV rules for Steam controllers, VR headsets, and all of the different input devices that are supported by Steam. So if we take a look at the Steam listing now, you can see I don't have it installed, but some of the metadata changes here, I added screenshots which I took from Steam's material. So if I now click install, that was Focus being stolen for me to enter my super secret password. That now gets installed, and there it is. So I should be able to click launch. I don't know if it's going to appear in the right window. Let's find out. If not, I'll drag it into place. Oh, actually, this was a feature I couldn't get to work. This was the feature I was trying to get fixed, and in the process broke it completely. So if I just start Steam manually, like so, where it displays, nobody knows. Let's see. Oh, over there, of course. And here it is. So Steam working. So what's interesting about this is that those... Oh, look at that. Borderlands 3 now available. How exciting. Steam is a 32-bit application. And you may remember there was some debate last summer when Ubuntu was, suggesting that we remove... hang on, Steam has left things running. Let's just kill these things off, exit that. Where, we were debating removing 32-bit multi-lib from Ubuntu and making Steam and other things available via container technology. So the first thing you can see is in Focal Fossa, which will become 2004, multilib, enough of multilib is preserved so that things like Steam and Wine and Lutris and other things that require 32-bit support, so some other games, some printer drivers, that capability lives on and, as you can see, works. Now, this presented an interesting challenge because in GNOME software it will only list software for the architecture that you're running on. So consequently, Steam wasn't showing up in GNOME software because it is a 32-bit Intel package, which is not the same as the architecture I'm running, which is a 64-bit Intel system. So we had to do a little bit of a dirty trick in the Debian control file. This is largely what governs what goes into a package. And you can see here architecture, if I just highlight that, architecture i386. So Steam, so i386 architecture, it doesn't show up in the store. So the way that we've dodged that is creating a package here called Steam Installer, which is for all architectures, and that in turn depends upon Steam. And that's why in GNOME software you see a package called Steam Installer rather than Steam, and how we're able to present Steam in the store for you to install. Some of the other changes we made, was to the metadata. So if we just take a look here, this is what populates the store. Oops, what did I do there? I need a wrong folder. So this is what populates the store. It's pretty straightforward stuff. I did write a completely specification compliant version of this metadata, and it didn't work for whatever reason, and I couldn't get to the bottom of why it didn't. This, curiously, is actually doesn't pass the validation tools, but does work. So that's a bug to investigate for another day. But now what we have here is we have some changes that exist in Ubuntu that don't exist in Debian. And that is not generally how we work as Ubuntu. We get a lot of value from being a downstream of Debian because there's all this great development that happens in Debian that we get to benefit from. And if I make changes here in Ubuntu and keep them in Ubuntu, then, we're kind of breaking a social contract there. So the plan is that we would now, or I will now, commit these changes back up to Debian. And, well, I could do that now, I suppose. There's no reason why not. So let's have a look. Let's get the thing open here. So here's the Debian Salsa GitLab instance. Let's just go back here. We'll fork this into my own repository. You can see here projects that I'm a member of in the Debian project. I've only recently been accepted into the multimedia team for reasons that we'll learn about later. Whilst that's going on, hello. Oh, hey, Popey. Thanks for joining. Pedro. I haven't seen you for a while. Thank you. And Rick. Hello, Rick. So Rick Mills has joined the chat. He was the community superhero I was referring to earlier that actually uploaded my packages into Ubuntu. So without his vital contribution, all of this would have been for naught. And McPhail. Hello, McPhail. Good to see you again. Oh, Pedro, you lurk. Yes, you do. So I now have a fork of the Steam packaging from Debian. So let's go and... Oh, hello. What happened there? Let's go and grab that. So I have a directory here called Debian, and we'll git clone that. This isn't Steam itself, this is just the files that define the package of Steam in Debian. So there it is. Now, because there is no connection in source control between Ubuntu and Debian, because of the break in sync that happened some years ago, I will need to merge these manually. Now, fortunately, we can call on our favorite tool, meld. So I'm going to meld into the Debian folder, and I am going to pull from, oh, you can't quite see because I'm in the way of my own stuff there. That's great, isn't it? Let's move this just for the purposes of this bit here. So I'm going to pull from, did I Steam, not the old version, that 5.4 is the original busted version, and then Debian. So if we run up meld, now we're looking at on, oh goodness, how is this presented on the stream? On, as we look at the screen, on the left is the Debian packaging, and on the right is my modifications in Ubuntu. So using meld, I can now identify the changes, and I don't want to change this because in Debian that is the name for the NVIDIA driver package, and it works quite differently in Ubuntu, so I'm not going to move over any of these description changes because these were specific to what we needed to write for Ubuntu. So those were the only changes in that file, so nothing to merge over. The changelog itself, I don't need to send the same changelog over, so what we'll do is not do that. And then we have a change here, one-liner. That's quite straightforward. Oops. So we'll save that. And then there's this app data that we have in Ubuntu that they do not have in Debian. So what I'm going to do is offer up this change, which would enable Steam to be installable via software centers in Debian, which I don't think can work at the moment. And then here's a very minor bug I found in the Debian package, that you'll see this package is duplicated, and it was part of an either or, so actually that doesn't need to be there. And then this here, this is the Ubuntu way to express what NVIDIA drivers are required, whereas this is the Debian way, so I won't be changing that. And then I think my only changes here were to add HTTPS to both those, so we'll pull that change over. And now we have this new sub package, which is the package there which actually installs, expresses it so that it can be added, and we'll add that in its entirety. So that's that moved over. We don't need to merge this, that's irrelevant. We don't need to make a change to that at all. Rules, what did we change here? Okay, so we don't need these changes. These are changes specific to the epoch version number that was introduced in Ubuntu, so none of this is relevant for Debian, so we don't need to pull any of that over. Steam installer install, this is these install files basically say take this file from this location, and when the deb is installed, put them in this location on the host operating system. So that's just moving that app stream metadata into the appropriate place, so we want that. And what did I change in here? Right, so again, this is something that I won't be changing because in this string of packages here there are differences, as you can see here, between the way that the NVIDIA drivers are referenced in Debian versus the way they're referenced in Ubuntu. So what we have here for Debian is completely accurate, so I don't need to make that change at all. And we have a preinst command. Why did I have a preinst command? And also, why is it missing from Deb? Oh no, that's right. So this preinst is a Debian thing. We'll leave that there. We removed that in Ubuntu because some of the software centers that some of the flavors use don't support debconf prompts. So that pre-inst was dropped in order that they are able to complete the install. I'm not going to mess with that in Debian because that's sort of a policy decision, and I don't want to tread on anyone's toes regarding that. So if I now close that and just maximize this again, oops, not maximize, bring it over here. So we can now see those were the files that I changed, and here are the modifications that have been made. So I think what we'll do at this point is, first of all, we'll create a new branch called Steam Installer, because I tend to put my changes in branches rather than linking pull requests from master to master. And now we'll fire up another one of my favourite tools, which is... oh. I've just found out I don't have it installed. That's awkward. Huh. Why don't I have that installed? That's annoying. Okay, well, we'll just do it the Steam-powered way then, or the old-fashioned way. Right, first of all, we'll add that package, and we'll say, maybe we'll do this over here so it's a bit more visible. So we'll add that, double typed. So there's that change committed. We'll then yeah. So we will take the control file change and this one, because they're related. The control file adds the sub package for the Steam installer, whereas that install file is part of that sub package. So we'll add those two together. Okay, so that's that done, and then what have we got left? That was a trivial change, wasn't it? Oh, hello. Why do you want to? Right then, that is the extent of the changes, I believe. So let's put, oh, whoops, yes, of course. Now let's push those up to my branch in GitLab. And we should now be able to see those. Up. and there it is. So you can see I've pushed to Steam, and I'll now create a merge request. And now I'll just explain what I'm doing here. That should cover it all. So I'm submitting that from my branch to the Debian Games team and proposing it to be merged into their master branch. And if I submit that now, you can see here are my 3 commits. And if I submit that merge request, that will now sit in their queue for somebody to review. So my role as a good open source citizen has now been fulfilled. Right. So I've just noticed that Yannick has mentioned in the chat that the screen is flickering from time to time. I forgot again to fix that this evening, so I tell you what, let's do that now. Let's do a live fix. Probably this is going to break the live stream, so that'll be fun. But let's have a go anyway. How confident do we feel about this? So somewhere in my development stuff, I wrote a script for a little project that Popey and I have, which is retro game game streaming. And I wrote a low latency point-to-point game streaming engine, and somewhere in here I have a bit of foo. There we go. That disables the flipping stuff. Oh gosh. Let's just find that very quickly. So I've got something here that says display. Oh, of course. Oh, that's it. That's all I need to do. Okay. I understand what that was now. So if I run that, didn't like that. Oh, of course. The other disadvantage of copy and pasting things from, there we go, is assigned. Let's see if that's fixed. So disabling flipping with the NVIDIA drivers should clean up the flipping around that you were seeing there. So let's move on to FFmpeg. Oh yes, so Yannick points out that I could have done that with the NVIDIA settings graphical tools, but why would you do that when you can do it in the shell? Old habits die hard, I think, is the thing there. So I don't know. Yes, so Yannick's asking, is the background music under a Creative Commons license? Yes, it is. I found a organisation called Royalty Free Music that provide a whole bunch of playlists for different genres and video styles, and then Popey discovered earlier that you can YouTube DL their playlists and pull them all down. So I sucked down one of their big playlists. I think there's 30 hours of music in this, and then imported it into Audacious, and I have Audacious running on another screen here with the volume turned down a little bit on, random selection from that. So hopefully it is all correctly not copyright free, and I won't get any content ID strikes on YouTube. Bacon Drinker asks, what Tilix theme am I using? So Tilix, however it's pronounced, is the terminal emulator that I use here. I'm not using any theme at all. I just configured it. So profiles, is that there? Yes, edit profile. So I just came in here and I set it dark by default, and I changed the font, and in appearance I disabled client-side decorations, hid the toolbar, and then, you know, changed a bunch of things in here. So it's not a theme, it's just poking around in the preferences, and that's what I did there. Hopefully that's helpful to you. Right then, so we've covered off Steam and we fixed the metadata, and what was nice about this one is that when I finally fixed the metadata, ASCII Wolf, our community friend, confirmed that it was indeed fixed, so that was good. And here it is. So here's Steam in the Ubuntu archive. So if I just maximize this window, you can get to any package here. If you just change Steam in that URL to the source package name for any package, you can access all sorts of information about the package, including accessing the build logs. So this was the build log for that build there. You can inspect all of that. You can see the individual packages that were created, and all that good stuff. And up here you can see the full change log. So here you can see every change that has been made to that package, and you can see that we were wedged on this 0.54 repack version for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 releases. And this is me, the last 3 revisions, fixing it up, as we just discussed. So next I'd like to talk about nvenc. Oh, okay. Before we get to nvenc, this site seems to be down. What site seems to be down, I wonder? I don't know. Bacon Drinker asks, could you export your colours? They seem to be a lot better than the defaults. I think that, again, is not technically anything to do with Tilix. I use the fish shell. So if we run up the... Oh, I didn't... Oh, of course. Well, I use fish, and this is a theme for the fish shell that you're seeing, not Tilix or Tilix. Right. Let's just get back here. Clear that away. Right. So next, I'd like to talk a little bit about FFmpeg. There's a bit to cover here. In fact, it's a 2-sip of beer length conversation. If you don't have a beer or a glass of water or a cup of coffee, or better yet, a mug of mate or a gourd of mate, go and get one. Right then, for the uninitiated, nvenc is the technology that lives in reasonably modern NVIDIA GPUs that enable you to do hardware accelerated video encoding. So this is particularly useful for live streaming, like what I'm doing now. And in fact, this is being live streamed using OBS, using nvenc hardware acceleration. And it's doing that using the snap of OBS. So Alan Popey, he created a snap of OBS some time ago, and I created a snap of FFmpeg where I enabled all of the hardware acceleration pipelines, including nvenc, but also things like OpenCL and VA API, which is what you can use on Intel and AMD APUs, IGPs and what have you. And then we got together at a sprint at some point in the past, and we folded in those changes from the snap of FFmpeg into the snap of OBS, which gives us a version of OBS which comes with batteries included to do fully accelerated live streaming and hardware encoding. And to prove that this is true, we can run NVIDIA SMI to look at the status, and here you can see the processes that are on the GPU, and here you can see OBS, and that is running from the snap of OBS. So you can also see some other stats and metrics and what have you about my my GPU there. Bill got water, good choice. I also have a large glass of water because I think I'll need that after I've finished the small glass of beer on account of all the talking. So this is all very well and good. There has been a fully accelerated FFmpeg in the archive in the Snap Store for some time now, and the same for OBS Studio. Anyone that says it doesn't work hasn't tested it, doesn't know what they're talking about. So let's prove that it actually works. I'm going to go to the Snapcrafters, my Snapcrafters repo, and to FFmpeg, and in here I wrote a test harness, again a fantastic shell script, and this test harness iterates around the FFmpeg installed as a deb and FFmpeg installed as a snap, and tests the various encoding capabilities that exist in both of those. And here's the key bit of information. In Ubuntu 18.04, nvenc was enabled by default in FFmpeg. But since then, the way that the enablement for nvenc is made available has changed. So at some point between 18.04 and 20.04, FFmpeg in the archive lost the ability to do hardware accelerated video encoding, and that made me sad. So I wanted to restore nvenc encoding. So if we just run this test harness, I think this will work. It pumps out a bunch of data and then it does some encoding. So let's just go and look at what it did there. So it said FFmpeg user. So this is the FFmpeg installed as a deb. It has these acceleration methods available. You'll notice nvenc is missing. But then you'll see it's got some VA API stuff. Oh my goodness, my computer is straining right now. I think I may have just loaded up the GPU with another encoding task there. So if this gets choppy, that's what's going on. I've just fired another GPU process at the NVIDIA card. And then if we look at the equivalent output FFmpeg snap features, you will see that it adds CUDA and QVID. And these are these are the outputs that are required for doing the hardware encoding. And you can see here's a list of the codecs, and the one we're interested in is this one here, H.264 nvenc. So you can see the snap is exposing the accelerated pipelines, whereas the deb is not. And then we can see it even more clearly here. It goes off and uses the deb version of FFmpeg to encode by test file with libx264, and it takes that amount of time. And then it does the same with the snap of FFmpeg, which completes a bit faster, but it also exits with an unusual signal. I'll look into that another time. And then FFmpeg from the deb attempts to do an nvenc install, and that errors because that codec is simply not available here. And then we do the same again, and that doesn't work either. And then we can see here's the snap of FFmpeg using nvenc, and it works, and it takes well, 8 seconds to do the video encode versus 33 on the CPU. So for reference, this is running on an NVIDIA 2080 Ti, and this is running on an Intel i9 9900K, albeit both of those doing this live stream at the moment, so it's not the full slice of what's available. And then you can also see that we do HEVC encoding with the snap as well, and the VAPI test doesn't complete because I have no Intel or AMD IGP in here. So that's the case of that. So Christian points out that the OBS snap doesn't launch on Wayland. Well, we could fix that so that it would launch, but then you're going to be out of luck anyway because you won't be able to stream any windows or screens. So maybe we should just catch that in the snap of OBS Wayland and tell you to use an alternative display server, as if there are many to choose from, but you would need to use X at the moment. So that's proving that the snap works and the FFmpeg doesn't from the deb. So what makes all of this work? There's these headers. They actually live in GitLab from the Git from the VideoLAN. That's the VLC project, and they have a mirror on GitHub. And I'm looking at the mirror here because it's a little easier to see what's going on here. And this is a very simple set of files. They're all MIT licensed, and here they are. 5 header files, and this is the important one. And what these do is when these are on the system at build time, there's some interesting conversation in the chat I'll get to in a moment. When these headers are available at build time for FFmpeg, it enables a late linker within FFmpeg. So let's do this. If we run user bin OBS, I'm running the snap of OBS to stream this, but I have the deb of OBS installed as well. So if I run that, here it is. Golly gosh, let's try and make that a little less crazy and just set that to something simple. So here is the deb of OBS running. And if we look at the startup output a little bit further up, we will see here. So it says here info OBS FFmpeg. Now I happen to know that there would be an additional line beneath that if nvenc had been built in. So the other clue is here. We can see FFmpeg VAPI is enabled. We see VLC, but we don't see anything about NVIDIA. So we can doubly prove that to be the case. We go to the settings for the video. Output. Which one is it? Output here. We can only see the software render in the drop down. Okay, so this is why this made me sad. People will and do install snaps of things. Some people just default to apt install, and I would really like people to have the best possible experience on Ubuntu, so I wanted to fix this. So here we have an OBS that doesn't use accelerated graphics, so let's exit that. So in order to do this, I packaged these headers for Ubuntu. And let's just go and take a quick look if I can remember where those are. Gosh, did I put it in? It's Ubuntu FFmpeg new and then NV codec headers. And if I just do a tree there, that's the sum of this package here. So the changelog is not very interesting. If you're not familiar with the anatomy of a Debian package, you have a changelog. Tells you something, the changes we looked at earlier for Steam, for example. The control file is one of the most important. That tells you what the dependencies are and what the relationships between the packages are and all that sort of things, what the build dependencies are. So because it's just a bunch of headers, it's not particularly complicated. And then we have the Debian copyright file. Every file that is installed by a deb package has a license attributed to it. This is one of the ways. If you saw Popey's video, I think it was earlier today or yesterday, he talked about using the feature in Ubuntu to just install the free software version, and it is guided by, you know, the contents of these copyright files to make sure that you're only getting the fully free and open source stuff. So McPhail asks why NV codec headers rather than NV codec dev. So NV codec headers is whatever the name of the project that NVIDIA and the VideoLAN project came up with. That's just the upstream name for this. But you will notice from my control file that the actual package that I'm exposing is lib FFmpeg nvenc dev, because that rather accurately describes the purpose of those 5 header files. They're dev headers. They're specifically for FFmpeg. They expose nvenc. So I've tried to be as explicit as I can in that package name. Other interesting things in here. We have patches. So again, if you're not familiar with Debian packages, you can patch the upstream source should you need to. So the patch I've developed here is a very simple one. The default installs in user local, and we don't want that. We wanted to go into user, so it's a very simple patch just to change the prefix that things get installed in. And then we've got the rules file, which I think is rather uninteresting for this package. Yeah, that's about as simple as it can be. And I did continue to bundle this get org source, which is just a convenience handler for downloading the source tarball. And the way that that works is governed by the Debian watch file. So the Debian watch file is a big, fat, mangly regex that knows how to go and check if there's a new upstream version of the package. And when I do a uscan download, it will go and use that watch file to query the upstream to determine if there's a newer version. And there we go. It's pulled a not newer version down, just refreshed. So anything else in here that is of interest in the Debian packages? Probably not. That covers most of it. I suppose Debian, this FF thing here, this explains how and where the files in that package should be installed on the host operating system. So that was it. So I made that, and then I uploaded it to, golly gosh, so many tabs. Let's have a look. I uploaded it to a PPA somewhere. Probably this PPA. In fact, this PPA. So I uploaded it here, and here is NV codec headers, the package that I uploaded into a PPA to test all of this. And then I went back and I modified the FFmpeg package to do 2 simple things. Add a build dependency on that NV codec package that we've just created, and then add a new flag to the build rules for FFmpeg, which I will show you, because we looked at the build rules for NV codec headers, and oops, and here it is. It's these few lines here. The build rules for FFmpeg itself are a little bit more comprehensive, as you might imagine. So the Debian rules here. This is the rules file for FFmpeg, as you can see, a little bit more involved. And somewhere in here I have a couple of lines that I added, and here it is. Here are the lines that I added here, and it says enable nvenc on AMD 64 only. And the reason for that is that this change enables a late linker for FFmpeg to load the CUDA and NVIDIA drivers so that FFmpeg can enable nvenc. but the NVIDIA drivers that do that are now only strictly supported on AMD 64. They don't make drivers for anything other than AMD 64 and some compatibility libraries for i386. So we only enable this build flag when we're building on an AMD 64 host architecture. And what that means is that it continues to build and work on ARM and Power and S390 mainframes where these drivers are not available. So you still get the software-only encoding capability on those other architectures. So that's really the extent of the change. It's just a few lines. It's quite trivial, really. And once I'd made that change, I uploaded FFmpeg here, and I've, in my archive, my test archive here, I wanted to be certain that this was going to work. So I've enabled AMD 64, ARM 64, ARM HF, which is V7, like the 32-bit Raspberry Pi architecture, i386, because FFmpeg is one of those packages that we continue to support with 32-bit multi-lib, because loads of games and what have you require those compatibility libraries. And for shits and giggles, a mainframe, because why not? I could imagine you'd want FFmpeg on a mainframe. I imagine it would do a good job of video encoding. So I built that, and they all successfully built, so that was great. So now I need to determine, does this actually work? So let's find out. Let's add that repository. You can do this at home as well if you're running Focal Fossa. And so Pedro says that makes me all the happies. I'm not sure what makes you all the happies. I can only imagine it's running FFmpeg on a mainframe, because that's the kind of thing that would make me happy. So we'll add the PPA. Now I know for a fact my system is going to tell me there are a bazillion packages to update, because I'm running Focal Fossa daily here. Well, you'd think that the mainframe should have tons of GPU modules. That's from Katana in the chat there. I think actually they have tons of punch card holding bays. So we won't do an upgrade, because if I do, well, let's show you what will happen. If I try and upgrade, it's going to try and pull in all sorts of things, including new NVIDIA drivers, which I really don't want to do whilst the system's running. So we'll just do apt install FFmpeg. Because there's a newer version of FFmpeg in that PPA, it will also resolve its dependency. So just installing that will just update that one package and anything it needs. So we're pulling in that new version of FFmpeg. Yep, so Pedro says that the thing that makes him happy is the fact that nvenc is going to be enabled in FFmpeg by default. And yes, that's obviously my intention here. I think that's a valuable feature that people have become used to having in 1804. And because there are still significant but fewer people running Ubuntu on the interim releases, some may not have noticed that this feature has been missing since 1810, I think. Right, so we've installed FFmpeg. So if we go back to our Snapcrafters with this here, we can run our test harness again. And we should see now, if I scroll back up to the top, that when we now run FFmpeg from the version installed in user, therefore the deb, we can now see there's CUDA and there's QVID. So, and here's nvenc and HEVC and all of that good stuff, all enabled, just as we see or saw in the snap. So we are doing a software encode. This is the point at which I worry the stream is going to get killed or go choppy. So if it does, I apologize. So we've completed that one. Then it does another encode in software using the snap of FFmpeg. I need to investigate why that signal is firing signal 11 though. Not now. I won't do that now. I'll do that another time. Just as a point of interest, my input.mp4 file there is a full HD trailer of Serenity that is being transcoded and re-encoded. Yes, it will do. I think because there's an artificial limit. So Pedro's saying it goes a bit blurry when I hit the GPU. And I think the reason for this is in the consumer grade NVIDIA GPUs, even the 2080 Ti, I think you're only allowed to put 3 active GPU processes onto the GPU. And I suspect I'm doing more than 3 at that point. So we can now see that we've got the Snap and Deb of FFmpeg both doing accelerated encoding, and you know, within a margin of error they are both performing at approximately the same speed. Yeah, I'm not paying the Quadro tax for this. The reason I got the 2080 Ti is to get lots of compute on a budget, if you can believe some kind of budget, an extortionate one. So that's good. So we now know that FFmpeg is working, the acceleration is working, and if we now run user bin OBS, the deb of OBS, and we go back, and I'll just put that on the, oh hello, yeah, that's there. So if we just scroll back up the tree here, somewhere in here we should see I was expecting to see an extra line there. Oh, there we go. nvenc supported, FFmpeg VAPI supported. So if we now hit settings and we go to output, you can now see I've got software and nvenc available. So without rebuilding OBS, it does the appropriate introspection, and we get accelerated FFmpeg. So the current state of play with all of that is this. Earlier today, let's see if we can wind this back and find it. I filed this bug a few days ago, which was my case for packaging NV codec headers, which we've just discussed. And earlier today, that was actioned, so we now have NV codec headers in the Focal archive. It's currently sitting in proposed, however. So the reason it's in proposed is part of the checks and balances in the Ubuntu project is I didn't upload this, I prepared the package. Somebody else had to review the package to make sure it was of decent quality, and then somebody else had to upload the package to sponsor it. So they're on the hook now for this, not me, thankfully. So I managed to convince my colleague Seb into doing that. And here it now sits in the new queue. And this is the final check and balance where one of the archive admins will check over all of these new packages, and they will have the final say whether they make it into the archive or not. So I'll be following up on this on Monday, and once this package lands in the release archive, then I will be talking to my good friend Rick, who hopefully is still in the chat. He knows this already, and asking Rick to upload the slightly modified version of FFmpeg that will then build and enable nvenc. And one of the discussions I had with Rick is he was saying I should file a feature freeze exception for this FFmpeg upload because it's a new feature. But in actual fact, in this bug here, where I say that I want to this, the rationale for doing this is that we are basically fixing a regression from Bionic to Focal, because Bionic had this capability. We've since lost it, and I am restoring this capability. So it isn't a new feature, it's a fix for a regression. So hopefully that explains how we or how I did this, why I did it, and more importantly, what happens next. So Debian doesn't have nvenc codec headers in its archive, and neither does it have an FFmpeg that is enabled. So earlier this week I had a conversation with a Debian developer that I work with, mostly on the Mate desktop, but he works in all aspects of Debian, with him and the Debian FTP masters, to basically discuss with them, were the Debian project happy with the license of the NV codec headers, which are MIT licensed, a very permissive license, but also the way that they behave, which is to late link to the NVIDIA proprietary drivers if you have them installed and the appropriate hardware installed. And they have given this the green light because there is prior art for other libraries in Debian that do similar things, and the one that was cited was libunrar of all things, which loads proprietary decompression modules. So you would have seen earlier when I was forking projects in Debian's Salsa, that I wonder if I can show what projects I'm a member of. Your projects, is this the one? Just going to do the right? Oh, that's just all sorts of stuff that I've done things on. But you can see the Debian multimedia team here. I requested to join the Debian multimedia team, and I've been accepted onto that team. And I am now going to, not right now because it's getting late, but I will prepare the NV codec header package, submit that to Debian, and once those changes have landed in Debian, then submit the changes to FFmpeg. And at that point, we no longer need to carry a difference between Ubuntu and Debian. We've now upstreamed the work we've done, and then we can continue to sync from Debian into Ubuntu. And you might be wondering, well, why didn't I just do this work in Debian in the first place? And the reason for that is that where we are in the release cycle, we've now at feature freeze and Debian sync freeze. So I mentioned earlier that we routinely sync packages from Debian, and we stopped doing that for this release on February the 27th. So because these packages don't exist in Debian, I can't manually sync them. So I've done these changes in Ubuntu because it's timely, and now I will send them back up to Debian over the course of this weekend. Maybe I'll live stream that. This is a process I'm entirely unfamiliar with, so I will be fumbling around trying to figure that one out. But that's it. So that's the state of things. A new fixed up Steam in Ubuntu Focal Fossa with UDEV support for all the new controllers. It no longer conflicts with the deb of Steam if you download it manually from their website, and it's got a whole bunch of architecture fixes, and it appears in the store and all of that. So Steam is in good shape. And then for people that may want to use Steam to stream games to Twitch or YouTube, soon, hopefully, you will have a fully accelerated OBS Studio, and other software that can talk to nvenc in FFmpeg is also enabled. So that's the state of things. I hope some of you have found that interesting, insightful. Maybe you're thinking to yourselves, that looks way too easy. I could do that. And I would say, yes, you can do that. As I said at the very beginning, if I can do this, totally you lot can. I'm no great shakes. I stumble my way through this stuff, and just with a little bit of time and interest, you can get a lot done. So I encourage you to find a pet project. Maybe find a bug, like the FFmpeg thing, something that bothers you. Scratch that itch. Bring something to the distribution. So I think I'm done. There's no. I don't think I've missed any questions in the chat. So thank you all for coming. I will be doing another one of these at some point over the weekend on what I'm not quite sure yet, but quite possibly something to do with QEMU, because I touched on that very briefly last night, and the only thing I've been asked about ever since is, can I go into more detail about what I covered on QEMU? So I thought I might write VirtualBox in a bash script. So let's replace VirtualBox with like 100 lines of bash. That seems like something fun to do on a live stream, and expose some of the underlying features of QEMU along the way. So maybe that's the next thing I do. Or maybe I fix Ubuntu Mate Software Boutique ready for 2004. I just don't know yet. So that's me on Twitter, m_wimpress. Follow me there so you get notifications. Mash the like button. Do you do mash or smash? Smash, one of those. The like button. Hit that. Thumbs up. Subscribe. Tinkle the bell. That obnoxious little bell. You need to press that. Kick it around a bit. I don't know why. It's right. You shouldn't need to, but you have to. And yeah, follow along. And hopefully I'll see you on another one of these. And if you don't see me here, then maybe go and find Popey's channel, which is in the featured channels here. He's doing similar stuff to this. You might be interested in what he's up to. So if you feel like what you've seen here is a bit beyond where you are right now, Popey's got lots of tips where you can get involved at, like, you know, grassroots. So thank you all, everyone, for coming. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one. And I'm now stuck on the wrong screen again. Bye bye.